Hello, folks. We're going to do a brief deep dive on customer and order management. This is primarily targeted at Sitecore Experience Commerce 9. So let's go through and take a look at customer management. So let's start with the customer registration process. So the customer chooses a register on the site. And when that happens, there's a Sitecore membership provider, which is an ASP.NET membership provider behind the scenes, registers a user in the core database. We also push the customer into XDB, where we're going to be able to start tracking analytics about the customer. And we also create the order and the customer entity in the Commerce engine. And what this does is allows us a place to store the orders that the customer has placed, their addresses, and other information about the customer that they give us as part of their transactional experience. We also add the order to a list that is used for indexing. So as soon as the customer is created, we add it to an index list, and we have a separate asynchronous process called a minion behind the scenes, which will pick up that order or that customer and walk it through and index it into the search index. And this allows us to find that customer via search from the business tools. So let's go over to our screen, and this is the customer business tools. This is a modern Angular-based tool, so it's all running in the browser. We use federated authentication to authenticate between Sitecore and the customer business tools. So they're very fast and flexible, and they're very easily extended through the same plugin metaphor that we use for extending everything else in the Commerce engine. And we think that's a very powerful part of this tool, that it can be extended and be extended using the same skill set that you would develop for extending your business processes. You don't have to learn Angular or anything like that, even though it happens to be Angular. And it makes it much easier for you to upgrade in the future when we can potentially change out the technology that's being used to render the business tools to something completely different, but all of your extensions would still work. And we proved that when we went from 8.2.1 to 9, where we completely rewrote the front end from the old Speak-based interface to a new modern Angular-based interface. And any customers or partners that have built extensions in the past to these business tools should still work. So we think this is a great story that we can actually completely change the front end and and you still have upgradability. Upgradability is one of the primary pillars of Sitecore Experience Commerce 9. That's traditionally the hardest problem to solve in a commerce product, and we think that we have a good architecture that helps us solve it. And the end result is that customers can stay up to date with the latest versions of the product more easily and less expensively, which allows us to make sure that you're always on the latest product, which helps us reduce support costs and helps you get access to the latest features and latest bug fixes. So we see in this customer screen that we have a set of tabs on the left, and we have different things. These can be extended to add additional functionality based on plugins. So you can completely extend to add a completely new feature, or you can extend an existing feature. Any of the screens that we show here can also be extended. We do support the idea of multiple environments. Environments really encapsulate a set of policies. So the difference that is primarily between what we see as an authoring environment and a shops environment is really about the rules associated with it, and primarily about caching. So authoring is really meant for creatives who are creating things like pricing and promotion objects. We turn off caching in those cases because we want to make sure that if you change a promotion or a price or create new ones, that the caching doesn't interfere with you seeing them directly on the storefront. And then Habitat Shops is more tuned toward production environments where we heavily cache most things. Pricing and promotion and things like that don't change as often in a production setting. And also for customer and order management, we use Habitat Shops because this allows us to have a very nice cached experience and be able to see customers and orders very quickly, but also be able to take advantage of the fact that we have a separate environment for that. So we see a list of recent customers. Because we asynchronously index the order, depending on what tuning settings you have, it may take a bit of time between when the customer is created and when it shows up in a searchable index. So what we do is we make some of the more recent ones available so that in the event somebody calls very, very quickly, you can still get access to that customer. But in most cases, between the time somebody creates an order in the website and potentially calls in, there's enough time to where the indexing has occurred and you can actually search for the customer. But let's go in and take a look at Easton here. She seems to be a pretty good customer for us. And we see that we have a summary of the customer. We see that we have a set of entitlements for this person. Entitlements are really kind of digital rights that have been acquired over many orders. That we want to track for the customer. A digital right example is they've bought a warranty. There's no physical warranty that gets shipped to them. There's just the fact that they've bought it, and we want to keep track of the fact that they've bought it. And we have the ability out of the box to delete entitlements, but then anything else we want to extend this, and it's a very extensible system, so we can extend customer entitlements in various ways, can be added to extensibility. But things like warranties and a digital product or an installation, things that are not a physical thing, often end up as entitlements. And of course, we have some details about the customer, and this can be extended as well. So things that they've told us, we know. Things that they haven't told us, we don't know. We have the ability to add a tag for a customer. So this gives us the ability to do customer segmentation. So if we want to segment a customer in various ways, then we could potentially do that through a tag system, and that's very, very flexible for us as well. If they've entered addresses, and they can choose to enter an address, or they could choose not to. When you go through the checkout, it's a choice that you make whether to save your address. In this case, Easton here didn't save the address, but if they wanted to not have to retype it every time, they could choose to save it. So we'll take a look at one of these orders. This is a good order. It's $3,000, so they must have bought some interesting things. So let's go take a look at it. So we see that we have the order object here, and you can see that we have really nice URLs where you can even save them to your favorites, or you can copy and paste them and send them out to someone so that they can get right to the same spot you were. So it's really nice to be able to do that, send somebody a link and have them be able to click right to what you want them to see. So we keep track of a confirmation ID. When an order is generated, we have a confirmation ID. This is normally what a customer would provide to you if they want to talk about a specific order, but of course they can also give you the email address, and you can search for the customer and find the order that way as well. When the order was created, its current status. When an order is created, we walk it through a workflow, and it goes through various status states. So we know that this order was completed. Which means that it has been, at least the shipment has been generated for it. We've charged the accountant all of that. We know what shop they use. We do support multiple shops, which could potentially change the rules. So we know they came in through this default storefront, but you could potentially have many storefronts or many shops and have different sets of rules for them. And we have their email address and various subtotals. We see that some adjustments have been made here. So it looks like the subtotal was $27.59. There was $30 worth of adjustments, and then the grand total was $30.50. It's important to understand that adjustments can be both positive and negative. So for example, you might be charging a fee, or you might be charging shipping or something like that, and those are considered positive adjustments. They increase the amount that you have to pay, and then there could be discounts and things like that that decrease the amount you have to pay. So this adjustments total is really the net between the subtotal and the grand total. Next, we have the payments that have been made, and in some cases there could be more than one. For example, they could have combined both a federated payment credit card with a gift card or something like that. So we may see multiple payments in here. In this case, we know it's a federated payment. We know that it has been settled, so we've actually charged the account and got our money already. Because we use a federated payment system, we're able to be part of a PCI compliant system, which means that we generally don't have a lot of the payment information other than the fact that it was a federated payment, and we might have some basic information. But for the most part, we like to remain blissfully ignorant of the actual card information itself. We do have a masked value of the card that gets returned, so that if we display on the confirmation page, we can show a masked value of the card number. But we definitely don't store the card anywhere in our system, and aren't part of the process that collects the card. It's done through an iframe, so that makes it really easy for it to be a PCI compliant system. Next, we have a list of order entitlements. So in this case, we know that this person bought this warranty. And we know that they've had multiple fulfillments. It's possible in our solution to have one or more fulfillments. You can choose a separate fulfillment option for each line. We do manage to control it so that you can only choose the kind of fulfillment that's relevant. For example, you couldn't choose to physically ship a warranty. So if it's a digital item, you only have the option to send that by a digital means, which is usually an email just acknowledging the fact that you got it. And then you can split the other ones up into multiple physical shipments. So we do support the concept of having both physical and digital items on the same order. And if that's the case, you're always going to do a split shipment. So you'll always see about at least two fulfillment options, possibly many, in a split shipment. And then we see any messages that might happen. So we know that this person received a free shipping promotion. So we know that we can look at the adjustments that happen, and we see that $30 we saw earlier up in the screen was actually due to this free shipping. So we know exactly why the customer got the price that they did and why they got the adjustment that they did. And we can look at that and we can see that that happens. Now, it is possible to have adjustments both on the order level and on the line item level. So we see that there were adjustments at the line item level as well. This could have been due to the promotion that was added, or it could be due to the fact that the item was on sale. And we know that what they bought and the variant that they bought. And we can see that they bought both a refrigerator and a microwave. So we know that they're probably renovating their kitchen. And they were smart and bought a warranty for these things. So we keep track of that. And if they have any issues with their refrigerator and microwave, they can contact us. And we know that they have the warranty, and we know when the warranty was started. So we know when it expires. And we also see that they bought an activity tracker. So that tells us a little bit about the person as well. Maybe they're watching their weight. Maybe they just want to be healthier. So we know that they're tracking that. There's a lot of upsells that we can do based on the fact that they bought these various things. So we can sell different things that we know if they're going to go running with their activity tracker, they might need music devices or they might need headphones and things like that. And then, of course, we have sales activities, and it's important to understand that there can be 0 to many sales activities. A sales activity is actually the exchange of value that occurs. So when you commit to an order, when you hit the submit order button on the website, we don't actually take the money right away from that. We've committed to it. They've committed to it, and we've committed it. So we've created a contract between us and the customer that says that we can take the money when we can fulfill the item. But in many cases, the fulfillment can't happen right away. Maybe it's a back-ordered item or a pre-ordered item, and we think that there's sufficient time in that process to get that item in stock that we want to wait and charge the customer when the item is available. In many countries, it's illegal to ship an item or to charge a customer when you don't actually have the item available to send to them. So you can't charge them months in advance for something that you can't ship them for a couple of months. Now, all of that is extensible, of course. So depending on where you are and what your region is, that may be different, and you can control that. But in most cases, we want to make sure that we can actually deliver the customer the product before we charge their card. It is also possible that if the system is extended and the order is split, there could be multiple charges. You might charge them for the stuff that you can ship them right away. And then when the item is, the back-ordered item is available, you may have another shipment, and you can charge them separately for that. And under no circumstances can you normally charge beyond what the agreed upon amount is. So if you choose to split the shipment, if you want to charge more for that, say example, you want to charge another shipping fee, then that's something that has to be negotiated back with the customer again. Most companies, when they choose to split, they won't try to backtrack and charge the customer an additional shipping fee, but that's really up to the business policies. But it's also important to understand that there can be positive and negative sales activity. So for example, a customer places an order and you ship the order and everything's fine. Subsequently, they call back and say, hey, I need to return this item. So in that case, we go back and we update the order and we get a new total. And then we credit their credit card the difference between what the total was and what the total would be once they've returned the item. And that's important because the credit that you would give to the customer is not necessarily just the subtotal of the line they returned, but it could also reduce their tax burden as well. So when we recalculate, it recalculates all of that for you, and we know exactly how much to give the customer back to make everything balance out again. All right. So let's go into a little bit of more detail about what happens during this post-order capture process. We think this is one of the more important parts of the experience, and it's important to understand that some people's post-order capture process can be very complex, and some people's can be very simple. It is very possible that all you do is post the order back to an ERP system, and you don't need all of these steps, and you can remove them. But in some cases, you even want a more sophisticated process that comes out of the box, and then you can add additional steps into that. So it's very flexible and should be only built to be as complicated as you need to satisfy your business requirements. The general pattern that happens is that an order gets placed onto the pending orders list. The pending orders minion then evaluates each of these orders and tries to do something with it. So it may be that it can release it. Everything's available. The payment can be settled, and we just release it. Or it may be that it sees that there's items that are not yet available, so it moves it to this other list, which is a waiting for availability orders list. There's a separate minion that watches this list, and it's important to understand that we can create a complete separation of concerns between the business process for managing these pending orders and the business process for managing these orders that are waiting for availability. So we can increase the sophistication of either one independently. And in this case, what the availability minion does is he walks through each item on a periodic basis, and that's controlled by you how often. And he'll look and make sure these items are now available. And if he finds that the items on this list are available, then he's just going to push it back to the pending orders list. And from there, it'll get processed normally. Now, it's possible that you move it back and some other problem occurs and it has to go somewhere else. But normally, once the order is available, then it should flow through the process correctly. It is also possible that the pending orders minion can't figure out what to do with an order. For example, it walks through a set of steps and tries to push an order either to released or to waiting for availability, and ends up not being able to process that order. So we also have the option of a problem orders list. And this is what a human can watch, or the possibility of having a more sophisticated process that can potentially grab orders that are problems and do something with them. So for example, the item wasn't available and it's not a back order or a pre-order. What do I do? The human can then decide what to do. In a lot of cases, what happens is the human CSR will then contact the customer and say, hey, we don't have this item, but here's another item that's similar to it. Would you like that instead? And this gives you the opportunity to upsell and solve a problem and actually complete an order. Even though the item the customer originally wanted, it ends up being in some problem state. We also support the concept of what we call an on-hold status. In a lot of companies, this post-order capture process happens very quickly. From the point where an order is taken, it's often the case where it's a very short amount of time before it's on a truck somewhere. So if a customer calls and says, I have a problem with my order, I need to change it, you have the ability to put an order on hold. And that stops it from going through any more process while you talk to the customer. And it's possible that at the end of talking to the customer, he says, okay, just leave the order as it is, and you can take it off hold and it'll just resume its normal path through. Or you could have changed the order. The customer could have removed an item or added an item. And then you either collect new payment or give them a credit, and then you pass the order back through again. So it is flexible to be able to stop an order from processing, manage it between the CSR and the customer, and then push the order back and finish processing on it. It's important to understand that there are states where you can no longer put the order on hold. An example of that is if the order's already been released and a shipment has been generated, and in some cases it's already packed and on a truck. For most companies, it's actually cheaper to let the order be delivered and then have the customer return it than to stop everything and kind of dig through a truck to find that order. So in most cases, once the order's hit a certain state, it can no longer be changed by the customer before it's shipped, and the customer has to go through the RMA process in order to change his order so he can return the item once it gets delivered. This is, of course, possible to change. These are pipelines, so it's easy to go in and change that strategy to meet your business needs. So let's look at it a little bit more detail about what happens when you create an order. You can think about this as a pipeline that occurs and then steps within these pipelines. So the first thing we do when the order is created is we create the federated payment. Remember, they went through an iframe and organized that payment with their payment provider. So we have a payment, what we call a payment nonce, which is a value returned back. It's a token returned back by the payment vendor that allows us to identify this particular transaction. So we validate that we have that payment nonce, and we validate that the billing party is okay, that it's not billing to a country we don't support or something like that. We should have already done that as part of taking the order, but we also do secondary steps. We always believe in defense in depth for these kind of things, so we do have additional validation steps. And then we submit that federated payment to the vendor. So we have their token. So we say, hey, this person has completed this order, validate that this payment occurs, and it creates the payment. Now, this doesn't mean that we've settled, so we actually haven't gotten our money yet, but we've validated with the federated partner that we can get our money when we want it. Normally, we don't get our money until we know for sure that we can actually deliver this product. So we take additional steps further on to make sure that it can be delivered before we take the money. But we want to make sure that that transaction happened the way it should and that we can get the money when we need it. So then we go and we create the order. And in those steps, we actually walk through all the order lines. And if there are no order lines, this is a defense in depth step as well. So it's possible that something fluke happened and the order was submitted with no lines. And we want to make sure we capture those kind of steps and do some additional validation on the order. We want to make sure the payment matches the total. So in some cases, and it should never happen, but we want to make sure that we have kind of escape states in a lot of these cases where there can be escapes that happen if bad things happen. So it is possible that we check some of these values, and of course this can be extended to add additional more sophisticated validations before we actually create the order. In many cases, we'll return back an error message, and the customer will not get his order created. They'll see a message, and that error message tells them what they should do. And if all goes well, we create that order entity and we delete the cart. Then we go in and do some more things. We update the coupon usage. So we look through the order to see if there were any coupons that were used. And for each coupon, we actually load the coupon and increment the usage count and save it. And then we have some additional pipelines. And these are valid for not only things we do, but also things where you can add additional steps that you might want to do after the order's placed. So at this point, the order's been generated. It hasn't been saved yet, so we have a persist order state down here. So you can have a pipeline that adds additional value to that order before it gets persisted. And in some cases, for example, we add a confirmation ID. And you saw the confirmation ID we have, and you could change that to have another confirmation ID strategy if you want. It is important that generates a unique confirmation ID. So we do have a rather long confirmation ID to guarantee uniqueness, but you can also guarantee uniqueness in other ways and make it shorter if you want to build a strategy for that. And we update the gift card balance. So if you use the gift card in the order, we want to go ahead and decrement that balance so you can't use it again. We have another item ordered pipeline, and this is where we tie in things like inventory updates. So in this case, we're going to decrement our inventory. It's possible that you have a secondary system that has inventory that also needs to be changed, or items need to be reserved, or things like that, and you can add additional steps here to reserve the merchandise before the order is finally persisted. And then the order is persisted. So at this point, we've returned a message back to the customer with a confirmation ID saying your order has been created and any additional information that we want to provide to the customer. And then the rest of the steps are asynchronous and happen, once the customer has left. So we want to be sure we do as little as possible during this create order process so that we can get the customer response back quickly. And then we can do the rest of it after the customer has gone on and done other things. So the next step that happens is we have the pending orders minion. So the pending orders minion, his job is to look at every order that's been created and decide what to do with it. His first step is just to validate it. Let's make sure that something bad didn't happen where maybe the order's not in the right state. He does want things to be in a pending order status. That's the things he understands how to deal with. So if it's not in a status he understands how to deal with, then he's going to push it off to the problem orders list. And if you add additional statuses and you want to have that not happen, then you can actually change these steps and add your additional statuses in here to allow those additional statuses to flow on through. We then make sure that the order items are available. Everything they ordered in that order is available. So we walk through and we check item availability for every item and make sure those items are available. And if not, we log it and we push it through. And then we settle the federated payment. So this is where we actually collect the money. We make sure that all the lines are available. We don't actually charge you unless the items are available to be processed. Currently, we don't have a process in place that would split the order. So we don't have a process that would ship the things that are available and not ship the things that are not available and have separate collections of payments. So at the moment, we make sure that if there's any lines that are not available, then everything goes to the waiting state. It's possible to extend the product and add order splitting and things like that. It's important to understand that because we do a federated payment, the customer has already agreed how much to pay. So it's very problematic if you try to charge the customer more once you've already returned back the order to them. So in normal cases, if you decide to split it, you would swallow the additional shipping fee. And if you want to charge them for that, then you'll need to calculate that way up front in taking the order, knowing that you're going to have to split the order. So it's possible to do that there and charge a couple of fees if you want. But in most cases, most companies, if that happens, they want to have a good customer experience, so they definitely won't try to charge them more for that split. We then process the order, so making sure all lanes are available. And you'll see that a lot of times there's redundant checks, because we want to make sure that each of these steps that we can add validations to make sure that the next step can happen. So we generate the sales activity. We've settled the payment. So now the sales activity is basically the log of the fact that we've settled that payment. And then we move the status of the order to a released state. At this point, we consider it released, and the order can no longer be modified. And the customer, if they want to change the order, they would have to be able to return the order through the RMA process. If we detect that it is a mixed order and it has mixed availability, then we immediately move it to the waiting availabilities list and take it off the pending orders list. This means the pending orders minion no longer cares about that order, and there's a separate waiting for availability minion who now has responsibility for making sure that order doesn't get forgotten. And he'll walk through all the orders in his list, and he'll move things back into this pending orders list when he believes that they're available. And then, of course, because the pending order really wants to remove everything he can from his list, if everything falls through and there's still nothing he understands how to do with the order, then he creates this problem order state, and he pushes it to the problem orders list. This is an order that has not been able to be handled by any of the other steps, so the minion doesn't know what to do with it. So it's important to draw this to a human's attention, and it moves it to a problem orders list. And humans can look at the orders that become problems, and they can increasingly make the solution more sophisticated so that fewer and fewer things end up in a problem state. And eventually, potentially, no orders end up in a problem state, or they become very, very rare situations. But it is important to have a fall through to where something is brought to a human's attention when there's some problem that can't be handled by the automated system. So you can use this for other things as well. As you add sophistication, if a human needs to track something, then you can add it to this list, and humans can go work that list. And then, of course, we persist and move the order, so it'll go off to the problem orders list if it hasn't been moved at some other state. So once the order is moved to this released state, there's another minion that handles releasing the order. Releasing the order has to do with kind of generating the shipment and generating any entitlements that might have occurred for the order. So for example, we walk through each of the orders and we look at the entitlements, and these are the digital things that were purchased, and we determine what needs to be done. An entitlement can be anything from a warranty to a service call to access to a service. Maybe you're selling cloud services, and there may be a cloud services that have to be provisioned, and some of those can take a long time and some of those can take a short time. So you can tie into this provision entitlements pipeline to take the order through the steps necessary to actually fulfill the digital piece of their order. We also, of course, add that to the customer so that we know we can track from the customer side which entitlements they have, and we add it to the order so we know we can go from both sides. And then we can set the status to completed. We also generate the order shipments. Now, it's important to understand we don't do shipping management directly. It is possible to extend the product to add more sophisticated shipping management. A lot of customers either integrate with a shipping system or integrate with an ERP or integrate with an inventory system that has shipping capabilities. So it's possible that generating the shipment is really just calling this external system to generate the shipment. But if you want more sophisticated management inside the commerce tool, then that can also be added as part of these steps. Because we have both order shipment level and line shipment level, we differentiate between those two in the steps, and we check and make sure that if there's line level shipments that we go through in each of the lines, we generate the shipment for that. And then we have move it to the released orders, and we set it status to completed. So then we're, from all intents and purposes, from the post-order capture step, we believe that we're done with the order. So it's in a completed state. The shipment has been generated, all the entitlements and provisioned. And so that's the end of the normal path that you take through this post-order capture process. Again, it's important to state that everything is extensible. You may have more sophisticated needs, you may have less sophisticated needs, so you can remove steps or add steps to make it tailor exactly to your business needs. And that's an important pillar of what Sitecore Commerce is the idea of opting complexity, that this should not be any more complex than you really need to do your business. And so you should be able to tailor it to meet your business complexity requirements. So thank you for this listening to this deep dive on the customer and order management system.